Outlaw Law is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law. Your law firm for life.
Welcome back into the Outlaw Lawyers. Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, managing partners, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. They are your hosts. They're practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. Offices conveniently located for you in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay-Varina, Gastonia, and now in Morehead City. I'm Morgan Patrick, consumer advocate. Each and every week, we hit a lot of legal topics. You may have questions of your own, maybe about a situation that you're in, and you need some answers. You can always call the firm, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call is about. An attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And you can always email your questions to the show, questions@theoutlawlawyer.com. Gentlemen, question and answer. Where are we going first?
Well, Morgan, before we get there, I forgot to tell you, we're not, last week me and Joe were remote and we were over at Shady's on Main Street in Garner.
Which is going to be your normal locale, correct? That's mainly where you're going to do the show from.
Yeah. We like it there, and it's got
way better than this this cramped office space that we're sitting in.
Yeah, we couldn't go there today. There were some other things going on over at Shady's, and so we got evicted our second week, and we're in the Garner. We're in the Whitaker and Hamer Garner office today. So that's where we join you from. I want you to be able to paint that picture in your head. So me and Joe are in the NC State conference room over in the Garner office, where me and Joe always feel more comfortable than NC State conference room.
And for the record, you weren't evicted. Right?
No, we were.
You just had to change locations.
Right.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been able to. It would have been difficult to get inside the building.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
Shutting the street. They got
Shutting down the street. Not for the Outlaw Lawyer, the radio show.
What, no parade honoring?
They were very excited.
Josh and Joe, no parade?
When they went in and out, they were shutting the street down. That's what all the listeners like, how are we going to get at the show they tape today?
But anyway, in the Garner office, very convenient because I was already here, so I didn't have to go very far today. But the first thing me and Joe wanted to talk about, and again, we call these listener questions. A lot of times it's just fact patterns. It's just general things that we're seeing in the office that we're talking to people about. And Joe, you've run into this one a time or two here recently, so it might be worth telling the folks about.
It's really warm in here, man. I was going to tell you that too. It feels better in Shady. It's got a better ambiance. The environment's better. You're not as close to me. You're very close to me right now. I feel like my knee could bump yours, and I don't like that, man.
Yeah.
What were you saying? You want a question? Yes.
Yes.
It's not really a question per se. I'd say this is more of a common theme, right? Like something that I'm not going to give you the exact phrasing of the question because we get this question in different forms, but the general topic, a thing that we've seen a lot more here of lately, and that I guess really it's been a thing that's been around for a long time.
Sure.
It's just a thing we've seen more frequently lately, and we can speculate as to why, but that's this sub-2 financing, right? So basically you've got somebody who wants to come in and purchase a property that has an existing mortgage on it and not necessarily do anything with that mortgage, right? Like basically step into the shoes of the former owner, start making their payments. And there's been a lot of like influencers and things like that who are like offering classes promoting this as a viable source of revenue, and that has in turn caused an uptick of the folks that have called us that want to get into it and that are interested in it. And it makes a lot of sense from one perspective, right? Because you say you've got an individual who maybe they're not in a great place to sell their home. They don't have a ton of cash flow where they can necessarily make repairs and fix the house up nice to be list ready. But they got a nice low payment. Their interest rate's super low. And what these courses do is they try to train you to basically pitch to these folks like, hey, I'll give you some money up front. I'll basically step into your shoes. I'll start making this mortgage payment, get the benefit of your rate. You deed me the property. And that's the idea in a nutshell.
Yeah. So in a normal closing where you're a buyer and somebody's selling you a house and you're getting a mortgage, there's a closing attorney involved. A lot of times there's real estate agents involved. And what happens is at closing, your closing attorney makes sure that any of your seller's mortgage liens get paid off. And basically the property comes to you lien free. Now you may be getting a mortgage, so you're about to add your own lien to the property, but the property is transferred lien free to you at closing. And here, I've seen a lot of these folks set up in hotels and kind of do, come to our pitch, and they'll this is how you can make money in real property. And maybe you can. I'm not here to shoot down anything that makes people money.
But there's apparently, that's the thing. Like the folks who are promoting the classes, they will tell you, and who knows, they could be right, man. I'm not poo-pooing them, but they'll tell you they're making like tens of thousands of dollars a month, millions of dollars a year, just strictly doing deals like this.
So the theory is on these deals that they market is you come in and somebody's got a 2% mortgage, or they've got some equity in the property, but they want to get out, and you don't want to finance this property, and you don't want to pay cash. So you give them a much smaller amount of money, and then you take title to the property. You get a deed, but they leave their mortgage lien in place, right? So they've got a, whoever the lender is, a Wells Fargo, a Bank of America, First Citizens, they have a mortgage lien on the property that you say, hey, I'll take that over, which this is a terrible idea for the seller.
I would argue that it could potentially be a terrible idea for everybody involved. And that being said, that's not to say there's not like you can look at this and be like, well, there's advantages for everyone. There are ways to look at this and find advantageous, things in the right deal for every single person involved. So I'm not saying that this can never be a situation that makes sense, but there's a ton of pitfalls, man.
I think fraught with peril.
It's like if you were walking into the house from Home Alone,
yeah,
and you're a burglar. That's what it's like, right? Fraught with peril.
Right.
You might avoid all the Legos, and you might not get your scalp burned off, but
for the seller, the person buying subject to the lien, they could just stop paying your mortgage, and then of course that's going to hurt your credit, your ability to get a new mortgage.
And you don't have title anymore. You don't own the property.
You don't own the property. You have no control over it. Transferring the property is probably a default on your note in your deed of trust, right? So your lender could foreclose on you the next day that you do that, So the seller is, and most of the sellers who entertain this kind of transaction either just don't know any better, or they're in such bad shape they don't have a lot of other maybe alternatives, or at least they don't feel like they have any other alternatives.
Or they're the influencers that are making millions a year and they know something we don't. That could be possible.
I
think there are some folks that are doing this successfully, right? On what scale, I'm not sure. But I definitely think that there are some folks that are doing it successfully. It's just a matter of finding the right deal, right? Like finding the right situation. And even then, you can do everything right. You can have the right deal. Those pitfalls are still going to exist.
Right. You could be the buyer in this situation. So in theory, you've given some money to a seller and you've got this property now, and you're either trying to rent it out or maybe you're trying to sell it and make money. But the lien is not your lien. It's hard to get a payoff when you sell it.
And that's the big one right there, right? Like
they don't have to talk to you.
Yeah. People who don't order payoffs for a living, I don't think they understand how frustrating it is to order a payoff. Even with authorization to order that payoff, man, it's one of the more frustrating things. Like different servicers are different, right? Like, and you can have a really good one where it's really easy. Like there's ones that are super simple. You call them, very straightforward and easy. And then there's ones where it's like pulling teeth, man, 7 to 10 days. And then they'll forget you called them in the first place. And it's a nightmare. So getting a payoff in the first place for your own mortgage can be difficult. Getting a payoff for a third party's mortgage, that the nightmare scenarios that can come up from that, man, I shudder.
Yeah, because the lender's not going to talk to you without really good written authorization, and then, like Joe said, maybe not even talk to you, and then they could foreclose on you. They could just say, "Hey, we're not talking to you anymore. We're not taking any more payments. Our borrower has transferred this property without paying us off. They're in default." They can start the foreclosure process, and whatever money you've put into this deal, you lose, right? If you get foreclosed on.
Well, that's the thing. It's not even like at that point you've gotten your, most of these deals aren't structured to where you're going to get anything else, right? Like they are structured where, in my experience, and again, there's folks that are doing it all different kinds of ways, but the pitch generally to these folks is like, hey, I'm giving you X amount of money up front, right? And then I'm just taking this over. You don't got to worry about it anymore. You don't own it anymore. And so In a perfect world, man, they make your payments, they pay it off. It's all good. You've already got the funds up front. And you may be thinking, even if you got the funds up front, you're like, well, that's all I needed, right? Like I just needed 5 or 10 grand. It's not my problem anymore. The problem with that is, say the individual who purchased and started making those payments, say they just stop paying, right? That's yes, you've gotten the money you needed out of it, but you're going to have a foreclosure. You're going to have your credit's going to get destroyed from that. Like you're going to have all the negative implications from that, regardless of who owns the property at that point.
Yeah, it may work out. I've seen it work out for people, even though I've counseled them not to do it. That's what we attorneys do. We try to look at something. We're very risk adverse, and we're usually pretty good at saying, "Hey, this is kind of risky," or "Hey, this is pretty safe," or maybe I can get rid of some of this risk with the right contract. But this is a risky proposition, and so I think if you enter into one of these contracts for deed, installment sales, they go by a lot of different names, but if you enter into one, you have to be prepared for some bumps, maybe some loss, because it could go completely sideways on you.
Yeah, I tell the folks, like there's some like when we meet with folks, like a lot of these folks they're taking like online courses where they've got like super charismatic influencer types, like really pumping, like you can do this. Anyone can do it. Your grandmother can come off the street and start doing these deals and get rich. And I'm not trying to knock those folks necessarily, but a lot of the times when the folks that call that want to explore this option, they're very gung ho, right? Like, cause they're fired up. They've been shot out of a cannon. And so you got to kind of temper them, right? Like you got to pull their expectations back. And so like you said, man, we're very risk averse, and we'll tell you about every single risk. And so there's a lot of folks, I'll tell them, this is what can happen. I can give a laundry list of things that can go wrong. But all of that being said, man, there's situations where everything could go fine. This could be a perfect win-win situation for everybody involved. No harm, no foul, nothing bad happens. But I think that's part of what we do in counseling folks is you got to prepare them for the bad, right? And so there's folks, I'll tell them, these are all the terrible things that can happen to you. And they're like, well, okay, like we'll still do it.
So you kind of go over what if scenarios.
Yeah. And so and we've had folks who have done it. And if that's the case, there are things you can do to safeguard against these pitfalls. Some of them, it's like I tell folks, you can't get rid of them completely. We can draft up all the documents, all the contracts, all the waivers, everything. And these situations could still arise. And we could probably do a whole show talking about the nightmare scenarios of what could go wrong to make one of these deals kind of become way more difficult than it has to be. But that, again, it can be done, but I will tell you, it's going to be way more complicated than you think. You got to be prepared to receive a lot of potential bad news about like you're going to get a very depressing speech from me if you come to me about like, you got to worry about this, and this. And then I'm probably going to make you sign something saying I told you all these things just in case it happens. But that being said, man, there's folks doing them, and there's folks that are doing them very successfully. And I think that's a good thing for them.
Yeah. I mean, be wise, proceed with caution, get advice, professional advice before you do things like this. So, guys, we've got more question and answer. We're going to get into those. The Outlaw Lawyers, Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, managing partners, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm, again, practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. And they've put offices pretty much everywhere just for your convenience. Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay, Varina, Gastonia, and now in Morehead City. If you have a legal question, something that you're facing, and you need answers, you can always call the firm, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And as we are doing today, you can email your questions to the show, and we will answer them on a future broadcast. We have more Outlaw Lawyer coming up next.